The smoke rose in slow, lazy spirals above the grill, carrying the smell of marinated meat and burning charcoal into the wide Texas sky. It was late afternoon in the suburbs outside Austin, the kind of neighborhood built on identical lawns and borrowed smiles. The pool shimmered behind me, blue and artificial, reflecting a sky that looked endless and indifferent. 1 week after the wedding, 7 days. That's all it took for the illusion to crack. I stood at the grill because that's where men like me stand. Slightly apart, slightly useful, hands busy so no one asks what we're thinking. I had paid for the wedding, paid for the catering, paid for the honeymoon in Cancun that Kayla complained was too humid, paid for the photographer who captured smiles that already felt rehearsed. I told myself this barbecue was symbolic. A blending, a fresh start, Megan's friends, the girls' circle, a few neighbors who pretended not to gossip. I basted ribs like I was sealing something sacred. Kayla leaned against the pool ladder, sunglasses perched on her head, her voice bright and sharp. Brooke floated nearby on a pink raft, scrolling through her phone. They were laughing, not with joy, but with the kind of practiced laughter that performs. Someone asked, casually, "So is their dad coming by?" A simple question, innocent enough. Kayla didn't hesitate. She tilted her head, smiled in a way that didn't reach her eyes. "We're waiting for our real father," she said. Brooke snorted. "Yeah, he said he might stop by. We'll see." Then Kayla looked straight at me. "This one's just temporary." There it was, clean, precise, delivered like a punch wrapped in velvet. The laughter that followed wasn't loud. It was worse. It was scattered, uneasy. Guests looking at one another, unsure whether to correct the girls or pretend it was harmless humor. No one corrected them. The tongs in my hand tightened. Grease popped against my wrist and I didn't flinch. The pain felt appropriate. Something to anchor me in that moment. Temporary. Replacement. I searched for Megan. She stood by the cooler, handing someone a beer. She heard it. I saw the flicker in her eyes, that split-second awareness that something had gone too far. This was her chance. One sentence. That's all it would have taken. Show respect. He's your stepfather. That's enough. Instead, she gave a small smile. Tight, controlled, non-committal. Then she turned away. And in that turn, I understood my position in this house better than any argument could have explained. I wasn't misunderstood. I was accepted as useful. There's a difference. I flipped burgers. I asked guests how they liked them cooked. I refilled drinks. I smiled like a man who hadn't just been publicly downgraded to placeholder status in his own backyard. But inside, something old and exhausted shifted. Because this wasn't new. This was confirmation. Years of little comments. Years of subtle exclusions. Family photos where I stood at the edge. Stories about when Dad used to, delivered with nostalgic reverence. As if I were the landlord of their memories, not a participant. Derek, the real father. He drifted in and out of their lives like a seasonal wind. Unpredictable, dramatic, and always forgiven. He'd send a birthday text at midnight and earn hero status. Show up with an expensive gift bought on credit and leave before responsibility arrived. And I paid Kayla's tuition when her scholarships fell short. I signed the lease for her studio apartment downtown. I covered Brooke's car insurance after her second fender bender. I refinanced the house when Megan said the interest rate was suffocating us. I replaced the roof. I repaired the fence. I paid the property taxes. I covered health insurance premiums that Derek promised to figure out soon. Soon never came. I came. Every month. Like clockwork. Transfer. Deposit. Withdrawal. My love was logistical. Structured. Funded. And standing there in that backyard, with chlorine in the air and humiliation sticking to my skin like sweat, I realized something brutal. Provision had been mistaken for obligation. And my silence had been mistaken for weakness. The barbecue continued. Music played from a Bluetooth speaker. Someone cannonballed into the pool. Kayla laughed again, louder this time, emboldened by the lack of consequence. I watched her, not with anger, with clarity. She didn't fear losing me. None of them did. Because they assumed I would endure. Men like me always endure. We rationalize. We justify. We say, they're young. We say, blended families are complicated. We say, respect takes time. But respect that must be purchased is not respect. It's rent. And I had been paying it for years. When the sun dipped lower and guests began collecting their things, I noticed something else. No one thanked me for cooking. They thanked Megan for hosting. Hosting. In a house under my name. On a mortgage paid from my account. With food bought by my card. Invisible labor. Invisible ownership. Invisible man. Kayla walked past me on her way inside. Don't burn the last batch, she said casually. Dad likes his medium. Dad. Not me. Never me. I turned the grill off slowly. That night, after dishes were stacked and the patio lights dimmed, Megan curled up beside me in bed as if the day had been unremarkable. You okay? She asked. Her tone was soft, curious, not concerned. I stared at the ceiling fan rotating above us. Fine, I said. She sighed. They're adjusting. It's hard for them. You know that. Adjusting. To what? Stability? Consistency? Someone who stayed? I waited for more. For an acknowledgement. For even the faintest recognition that what had happened was wrong. It never came. Instead, she placed her hand on my chest. Don't take it personally. There it was again. Don't take humiliation personally. Don't take erasure personally. Don't take replacement personally. I lay there in the dark, listening to her breathing even out as she fell asleep, and I began to replay the afternoon in slow motion. Kayla's smirk, Brooke's echo, the guests' laughter, Megan's silence. The realization didn't arrive like an explosion. It arrived like a ledger, clear, balanced, unemotional. I had invested years into a family that viewed me as a funding source. My presence was tolerated. My money was required. My authority was negotiable. My dignity was optional. And that was the part one could no longer ignore, because I could survive disrespect from children, but I could not survive complicity from my wife. Her silence was not neutrality. It was agreement. She would never correct them because somewhere, deep down, she believed what they believed. That I was temporary, a bridge, a safety net, a man filling space until something more authentic returned. I felt something close inside me that night. Not anger, not grief, something colder, final, the kind of clarity that strips away self-deception. I thought about the joint bank accounts, the automatic payments, the car notes, the apartment rent, the mortgage, all flowing from me, all unquestioned, all expected. I realized something else too. If I disappeared tomorrow, they would mourn the inconvenience before they mourned the man. That truth didn't break me, steadied me, because once you understand your value in someone's life, you can decide whether the exchange is fair. And ours wasn't. Love without respect is not love. It's a transaction where only one person signs the checks. I had been signing for years. In that dark bedroom, with Megan asleep beside me and the faint smell of barbecue still clinging to my hair, I made a decision so quiet it felt like a whisper inside my own skull. I would no longer finance my own humiliation. I didn't need a confrontation. I didn't need raised voices. I needed action. Silent, precise, final. Because if I was temporary, then so was my support. And the next morning would be the first day they learned what temporary really meant. Morning in Texas comes without apology. The sun doesn't rise gently here. It arrives, bright, unforgiving, exposing everything it touches. I was already awake when the first light cut through the blinds. Megan slept beside me, her breathing slow, peaceful. She had the luxury of peace. I did not. I lay still for a moment, listening to the house. Water pipes ticking. The faint hum of the refrigerator. A car passing somewhere beyond our cul-de-sac. Ordinary sounds. Domestic sounds. A house I paid for. A life I financed. A role I never truly held. The decision I made the night before hadn't faded with sleep. It hadn't softened. Felt sharper in the daylight. Clean. Mathematical. I slipped out of bed without waking her. No confrontation. No announcement. Just movement. In my office, I closed the door and sat at the desk where years of transfers had been executed with blind loyalty. I opened my laptop and logged into our joint accounts. Checking. Savings. Credit lines. Everything braided together in the name of us. There was something almost ceremonial about it. The cursor blinking. The soft glow of the screen. The quiet hum of the processor. I started with the joint checking account. Close account. The bank required confirmation. Are you sure? Yes. I transferred the remaining balance into a separate account in my name only. One I had opened years ago and never used. A precaution I never thought I would need. Next came the automatic payments. Kayla's studio apartment rent. Cancelled. Her car insurance removed from autopay. Brooke's vehicle loan terminated from my account. Utilities for the house scheduled to end at the close of the billing cycle. Each click felt less like revenge and more like correction. I wasn't taking anything that wasn't mine. I was reclaiming what always had been. Then the larger decision. The lease. The house had always been in my name. Megan had insisted early on that it was simpler that way. I had agreed without thinking. I was earning more. It made sense. Now it made sense in a different way. I opened the property portal and submitted the termination notice. 60 days. That was the legal window. 60 days until the foundation disappeared beneath their feet. I sat back in the chair and exhaled slowly. No anger. No shaking hands. Just clarity. After that, I gathered documents. Passport. Social security card. Financial records. Insurance policies. I placed them carefully into a leather folder. I had bought a small lake house in North Carolina years ago, almost impulsively. A place I told Megan could be an investment property. She had never visited it, never asked about it. It was quiet there, remote, mine. By noon, Megan noticed the unusual silence in the house. She stepped into the office doorway. "You're home today?" "I took the day," I said. She smiled faintly. "Still thinking about yesterday?" There it was again. Minimization. I looked at her, really looked at her, at the woman I had built my days around. "Not anymore," I said. She didn't understand. She nodded and walked away. Kayla was out. Brooke slept late. The house felt hollow already, like it knew something was ending. By afternoon, I was packing. Not clothes. Not yet. Just essentials. Documents. A few personal items. Things no one else would notice were missing until much later. Before sunset, I made one final transfer. The remaining shared funds, what hadn't already been separated, I sent to Derek. Every cent. Along with a memo line that read, "Your daughters. Your responsibility." I printed the transaction confirmations. I organized them neatly into a folder. Bank statements. Account closures. Lease termination notice. Utility cancellations. Evidence. Not of betrayal. Of boundaries. That night, dinner was tense but normal on the surface. Brooke talked about a friend's birthday. Kayla complained about traffic. Megan asked if I could look at the sink upstairs. It was draining slowly. I listened. I nodded. I chewed. And I understood something profound in that ordinariness. They had no idea their safety net had already been cut. After dinner, Megan reached for my hand on the couch. "You've been distant," she said softly. I studied her face. "I've been present," I replied. She frowned slightly, not grasping the difference. Later, when the house fell quiet, I carried my packed bag to the garage. The engine of my car sounded louder than usual when it started. Final. Mechanical. Unemotional. I walked back inside once more. On the kitchen table, I placed the folder. Centered. Deliberate. A paperweight on top to keep it from shifting. I stood there for a long moment, staring at it. No letter. No dramatic goodbye. Everything they needed to know was inside. Numbers. Signatures. Dates. Consequences. I went upstairs. Megan stirred as I entered the bedroom. "You going somewhere?" she murmured, half asleep. "Yes," I said. For work. I paused. For good. She didn't fully wake. Not yet. The meaning hadn't reached her. I didn't explain. I picked up my bag. Walked down the stairs. Past the kitchen table. Past the folder. Out the front door. The night air was warm, thick with the scent of summer and distant cut grass. I locked the door behind me, not out of cruelty, out of closure. The drive east began under a sky stretched wide and indifferent. Mile after mile of highway unspooled ahead of me, Texas fading behind in darkness. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel grief. I felt light, because sometimes leaving isn't abandonment. It's refusal. Refusal to be temporary. Refusal to be a wallet with a pulse. Refusal to keep paying for a seat at a table where you were never invited. Somewhere past the state line, my phone began to buzz. I didn't look at it. Not yet. Silence can be louder than any argument. And for the first time in years, the silence belonged to me. North Carolina greeted me with fog. Thin, pale, honest. The lake lay still outside the small house I had purchased years ago under the excuse of investment. The wood siding had weathered softly with time. The dock stretched into quiet water that asked nothing from me. No one here knew my name. No one here expected a transfer on the first of the month. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Dust floated in narrow beams of morning light. The air smelled of pine and stillness. Felt unfinished, unclaimed. Felt like mine. I set my bag down on the bare hardwood floor and finally looked at my phone. 32 missed calls. Megan. 12 messages from Kayla. 8 from Brooke. 3 from unknown numbers that could only be Derek. I didn't open them immediately. I made coffee first. Let the machine hiss and sputter. Let the ritual ground me. Because I knew once I stepped into that digital storm, there would be no pretending this was theoretical. The first voicemail was Megan's. Where are you? Why are the accounts locked? The bank says the checking account is closed. Call me immediately. Not panic yet. Confusion. The second voicemail arrived 40 minutes later. Why is Kayla's rent unpaid? They're saying it's overdue. What did you do? The third was sharper. You terminated the lease? Are you out of your mind? I listened to them in order like chapters in a predictable novel. By the 7th message, her voice cracked. You can't just disappear. You can't just do this to us. To us. I leaned back in the wooden chair and stared at the lake through the window. I had done nothing sudden. Nothing irrational. I had simply removed myself. The texts from Kayla were less restrained. What the hell? My landlord says rent didn't clear. My card is declined. This is insane. You can't ruin my life because you're sensitive. Sensitive. Brooke's messages were shorter. Why is my car payment bounced? Insurance says policy canceled. Mom is freaking out. Call us. Not one message said, I'm sorry. Not one said, we shouldn't have said that. Only finances. Only stability. Only inconvenience. By midday, the tone shifted from outrage to fear. Megan. The utilities are scheduled to disconnect. Kayla. I can't cover rent. Brooke. They're threatening repossession. The house in Austin was still standing, but the scaffolding I had built beneath it was gone. And suddenly they could feel the drop. My phone rang again. Derek. I let it ring twice before answering. What the hell is this transfer? He demanded without greeting. You dumped everything into my account? Correct, I said calmly. I'm not taking responsibility for your meltdown. It's not my meltdown, I replied. It's yours. They're your daughters. Silence. Then a scoff. You think I can just absorb this? Tuition? Rent? Insurance? I don't have that kind of money. I looked out at the water. Neither do I anymore. That's not how this works. That's exactly how this works. He exhaled sharply. You're being petty. No, I said. I'm being consistent. He didn't have a rebuttal. Because consistency is difficult when you've lived on someone else's reliability. After we hung up, the calls intensified. Megan switched tactics. Her voice moved from anger to negotiation. Let's talk about this like adults. I didn't agree to this. You're destroying everything we built. We built. I almost laughed at that. Built requires shared labor. What we had was dependency. By evening, Kayla called directly. Her voice trembled, but not with remorse. They're giving me 72 hours before eviction proceedings start, she said. You can't just pull support without warning. I can, I replied. Why? Because of one joke? It wasn't a joke. You're overreacting. No, I said quietly. I'm responding. There was a pause. You're ruining my stability. I let that word hang. Stability. The same stability she had mocked as temporary. You told everyone I was temporary, I said. So I am. She inhaled sharply. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. Silence again. Then frustration. This is about money to you? No, I said. It's about respect. She didn't understand the difference. None of them did. That night, I sat on the dock and watched the sun sink into the lake. The sky bled orange and purple without apology. My phone continued vibrating beside me. Voicemail after voicemail. Accusations. Threats. Legal language thrown around without understanding. Megan left one message that almost sounded human. I never agreed with what they said, she whispered. I just didn't want conflict. There it was. Avoidance. Silence dressed as peacekeeping. But silence has consequences too. Over the next week, reality settled in for them. Utilities disconnected. Kayla moved out of her apartment. Brooke's car was repossessed from a grocery store parking lot. The house notice arrived, termination confirmed. They scrambled, called Derek again and again. He stalled, deflected, promised to figure something out. He wasn't in a hurry, because stepping up is expensive, and he had never been required to. Until now. Megan sent one final message that cut through the noise. Was any of it real to you? I stared at the screen for a long time before answering. All of it was real to me. That was the tragedy. I had meant every sacrifice, every payment, every repair. I had believed in permanence. They had believed in access. And when access disappeared, so did the illusion. 2 weeks passed. The calls slowed. Desperation turns to resentment when solutions fail. Then silence. Not the peaceful kind. The resentful kind. I formally removed myself from every shared obligation. Signed documents electronically. Updated beneficiaries. Changed passwords. Clean, legal separation from a life that had already excluded me emotionally. The Austin house would continue. Without my name. Without my signature. Without my money. And Derek? He wasn't rushing to become the hero. Because heroism requires more than genetics. It requires cost. And cost is what he had always avoided. As the final notifications stopped buzzing, the lake grew quieter each evening. The panic had run its course. The shock had settled into reality. They were learning something I had known for years. Provision feels invisible until it's gone. And when the wallet closes, so does the illusion of unconditional loyalty. I wasn't chased for love. I was chased for liquidity. That was the final break. Not the leaving. Not the closed accounts. The realization that even in crisis, no one said the words that mattered. We were wrong. We hurt you. We're sorry. Only fix it. Only pay it. Only come back. But coming back would mean stepping back into a role already defined. Temporary. Replacement. And I had finally chosen permanence. Even if it meant being alone. The mornings by the lake arrive without accusation. No slammed doors. No vibrating phone on a nightstand. No voice asking for money disguised as reconciliation. Just water. Still. White. Indifferent. I wake before the sun most days. Not because I have to. Because I can. There is a difference between obligation and choice, and I am only now learning its weight. The small lake house creaks as it adjusts to the cool air. Wood expanding. Settling. Honest sounds. Nothing here pretends to be something else. I make coffee in silence. No one complains it's too strong. No one asks if I paid the Wi-Fi bill. No one laughs about waiting for their real father. The first week after the calls stopped was the hardest. Not because I doubted my decision, because I had to sit with the absence of noise. For years, chaos had filled every corner of my life. Payments due, repairs needed, emotional landmines to step around carefully. I had confused activity with purpose. Out here, there is no performance, just reflection. I walk down to the dock each morning and sit at the edge, feet hovering above dark water. The lake doesn't care who I used to be. It doesn't measure my worth in transfers or tuition receipts. It asks nothing. And in that nothing, I finally heard myself. I replayed the barbecue more than once. The smirk, the word temporary, Megan's silence. But something shifted over time. At first, the memory burned. Then it clarified. They didn't betray me in that backyard. They revealed me, revealed what I had allowed. I had accepted small dismissals for years because I believed endurance was noble. I told myself that love meant absorbing disrespect without complaint. That sacrifice would eventually earn recognition. But love without respect is not devotion. It is imbalance. And imbalance rots foundations quietly. Megan tried calling again after 3 weeks of silence. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was calmer this time. "The girls are staying with Derek for now," she said. "It's not going well. He can't cover everything. They're angry. At you. At me. At him." A pause. "I didn't think you'd actually leave." There it was. She had expected me to threaten, to cool off, to return. She had believed my tolerance was permanent. She had mistaken patience for incapacity. I did not return the call. Because the truth is, I didn't leave out of anger. Anger is loud, impulsive, temporary. I left out of clarity. The kind that arrives when you realize you are negotiating for dignity in a house you built. The lake house needed work. The deck boards were warped in places. The dock leaned slightly to one side. I repaired them myself. Measured, cut, replaced. There was something grounding about fixing wood that didn't argue back. Each board secured felt like reclaiming something internal. One afternoon, as I hammered in the final nail on the dock, my phone buzzed again. A text from Kayla. It was short. "Derek says he can't help anymore. We might have to move." No apology. No acknowledgement. Just consequence. I stared at the message. I could have wired money in seconds. I could have solved the instability with a transfer. But that would return us to the original equation. Disrespect funded by endurance. I typed back one sentence. "I hope you figure it out." I set the phone down. That was the moment I knew the separation was complete. Not because I didn't care. Because I refused to resume the role they assigned me. Replacement. Temporary. Wallet. I am none of those things here. Here, I am simply a man in a quiet house beside a patient lake. Time passes differently without constant demand. Weeks blurred into a slower rhythm. Groceries for one. Bills manageable. Evenings spent watching light fade across water instead of across strained faces at a dinner table. And in that stillness, I began to understand something I hadn't allowed myself to see before. I had built my identity around being needed. Not respected. Needed. There is a dangerous satisfaction in being indispensable financially. Feels like power. Feels like importance. But it is a fragile kind of relevance. The moment someone believes they can replace you, the illusion collapses. Megan sent divorce papers by courier. Efficient. Clean. Predictable. I signed them without hesitation. Not because 16 years meant nothing. Because I finally understood what they had meant. They had been years of provision, not partnership. The final call came from Brooke. Her voice was quieter than I had ever heard it. "Do you ever think about coming back?" she asked. "Yes," I answered honestly. Silence stretched between us. "But I won't," I added. "Why?" she whispered. I looked out at the water. Because nothing would change. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She simply breathed on the other end of the line, as if measuring the distance between what was and what could have been. Before hanging up, She asked something that lingered long after the call ended. Did you ever love us? The question didn't wound. It saddened. Yes, I said. I did. And I meant it. That's the part no one sees when they label a man cold. Love does not obligate you to remain where you are diminished. Love does not require you to fund your own humiliation. Love without respect is a transaction where only one person pays. And I had paid enough. Some evenings, when the sky darkens and the lake turns black as ink, I sit at the small wooden table by the window and think about the empty chairs in Austin, the barbecue grill, the laughter, the word temporary. If I had swallowed it again, what would have changed? Another year of tuition, another car payment, another public joke at my expense, another quiet night where Megan chose peace over principle. No, sometimes the strongest response is absence. A closed account, a terminated lease, an empty chair at the table, not as revenge, as boundary. I am not a replacement. I am not infrastructure. I am not a convenience. I am a man who finally chose himself over the illusion of family. The lake remains still. The house remains quiet. And for the first time in years, so do I. Tell me, was I wrong to leave when respect never arrived? Or would you have stayed, smiling at the grill, waiting to be chosen in a house that had already decided you were temporary?